There's a certain kind of person who's genuinely hard to love. Not because they're cold, not because they don't want connection, but because somewhere along the way, love stopped feeling like something that just arrives. It started feeling like something you have to figure out what to do with. Someone says something warm to them, genuinely warm, and they deflect it. Not rudely, just automatically, like stepping out of the way of something they didn't see coming. Someone loves them consistently, without conditions, and instead of feeling safe, it feels almost suspicious, like there's a catch somewhere they just haven't found yet. Someone gets close, and they go quiet, not because they want distance, but because caring about something that might leave feels more dangerous than not caring at all. From the outside, this looks like emotional unavailability, like fear of commitment, like someone who just doesn't let people in, but that's not quite what it is. What it actually is started a long time ago, before they had any words for it. By the end of this video, you'll understand something that most people in this situation have never been able to explain, even to themselves. Why love feels complicated when it really shouldn't. Why closeness feels like a risk. Why someone being warm to you can feel somehow like standing too close to something that's about to move. But before we get there, here's the thing I want you to hold on to. The hardest part of this to explain isn't the damage itself. It's that from the outside, and sometimes from the inside, nothing seems to have gone wrong at all. There's something a child needs that doesn't really have a name. It's not food, it's not shelter, it's not even words, exactly. It's the moment when you reach towards someone and they turn toward you. Not to fix anything, not to give you something, just to show that they noticed you were there. A glance, a slight change in expression, something that quietly says, "I got that. You're real to me." When that happens consistently, a child doesn't even notice it. It's just what being alive feels like. It's just the texture of the world. But when it doesn't happen, when the reach goes out and nothing comes back, the child doesn't decide the adult was distracted. Children don't think that way yet. They decide the reach wasn't worth responding to. Not in words, not as a thought, but quietly, in the body. The way expectations get updated without anyone choosing to update them. Less reaching, less offering, less noise. Not a decision, an adaptation. And that adaptation, that quiet internal shift, is where the real story of this person begins. Psychology has spent decades studying the kind of damage you can point to. The event with a clear before and after. The wound that has a shape and a name. What's been much harder to study, and much harder for the people living it to explain, is the kind that exists in absence. Not what happened, what consistently didn't. The mirroring that was never there. The attunement that was missing. The parent who was physically in the room, but emotionally somewhere else entirely. Not out of cruelty, often just because they were overwhelmed or struggling, or simply never taught how to do it themselves. Psychologists call this childhood emotional neglect, and the reason it stayed understudied for so long is the same reason the people who experienced it have trouble describing it. There's nothing to point to, and because there's no incident to name, no story to tell, the adult who grew up this way tends to minimize it. Nothing really bad happened to me. My parents were just busy. I had a roof over my head. I shouldn't complain. And that habit, reaching for the words and then quietly putting them back, is itself a small trace of the original thing. The house was still standing. Nobody is going to write a memoir about the birthday where something just felt off and they couldn't explain why. Nobody thinks of the times no one came as something worth grieving. But those moments do leave something behind. Quiet, persistent, and entirely real. Here's something that doesn't get talked about enough. The nervous system keeps records. Every time a child reaches out and finds nothing, The stress response quietly fires. Not a loud alarm, just a background signal. The brain files it, updates its picture of the world. If I reach out, nothing comes. If I show something I'm proud of, nothing comes. If I fall apart, nothing comes. So the brain, doing exactly what it's designed to do, stops routing through those pathways. It builds different ones, toward self-sufficiency, toward reading the room before entering it, toward tracking other people's moods the way you'd track weather. Not because you're curious, but because your sense of safety depends on getting the forecast right. And over time, this becomes invisible, unconscious, just the way they are. They can feel a shift in someone's tone before the sentence finishes. They catch the expression that says someone is pulling away before that person even knows it themselves. From the outside, this looks like sensitivity, like emotional intelligence. And in a way, it is. But it's a sensitivity that was never designed to turn inward. They learn to read everyone else, while slowly going quiet inside themselves. They can read a room, they just can't always find themselves in it. They grow up competent, often very competent. The kind of person who handles things without being asked, who shows up for other people reliably, who notices when someone's off. But ask them how they are, genuinely, not as a greeting, and something happens. They give you an answer that sounds complete, but doesn't really say anything. Not because they're hiding it, because they honestly aren't sure. There's a clinical term for this: alexithymia. Difficulty identifying and describing your own emotional states. It shows up at significantly higher rates in people who grew up without emotional mirroring. It isn't a personality type. It's a gap that formed where something should have been. And then there's love, which is where it gets complicated in a way that's painful to be inside, because the desire for closeness never really left. It just went underground early. Because need without response is eventually a lesson. So when someone is genuinely kind to them, consistently, without strings, part of them receives it, and another part of them waits, not waiting for something bad exactly, just waiting for it to stop, because love was unpredictable once. It disappeared once. And the deepest thing they learned, below language, below memory, is that counting on it is the dangerous part. The desire for closeness and the instinct to protect against it end up living right next to each other. And most of the time, neither one wins cleanly. What's interesting is that this doesn't look the same in everyone, but the shapes it takes are surprisingly consistent. Some people came out of it fiercely self-reliant. They handle everything alone. They'd call it independence, and a lot of the time, it genuinely is. Except it also means no one ever gets close enough to actually know them. The self-reliance started as a solution, and somewhere along the way, quietly, it became a wall. Some became high achievers, not because achievement is hollow, but because somewhere underneath every goal, there's still that child trying to produce something worth noticing. The goalpost keeps moving, because the original need was never the accomplishment. It was the look on someone's face when they saw it. Some became peacekeepers, always slightly monitoring the room, always adjusting themselves to make sure everyone else is comfortable. Their own discomfort gets managed privately, efficiently, and usually before anyone else knows it was there. They are endlessly available for other people's feelings, and quietly, chronically, alone with their own. And some just withdrew, made the world smaller, decided the gap between people was safer than trying to close it, and eventually stopped trying. None of these are failures. They all made sense. They all worked once. The only problem is that coping mechanisms don't retire themselves just because the original situation is gone. The person isn't in that room anymore. But the nervous system, still running its old program, hasn't quite gotten the memo. Here's something that really doesn't get talked about. Healing from this isn't like healing from a specific wound. There's no moment to go back to, no memory to work through, no incident to finally make peace with. It's more like grieving something that never existed, which is a strange kind of grief because there's nothing to hold, nothing to point to, nothing to say goodbye to. How do you mourn a version of your childhood that should have been there? How do you process the absence of a feeling you never actually had? It turns out, slowly, and usually with someone else present. Not because they can fix it, but because part of what was missing was exactly this. Someone paying attention without an agenda. Someone who simply stayed. Every time that happens, every time someone is genuinely there and the feared thing doesn't follow, something in the nervous system quietly updates. Not all at once, not permanently, just a little. A small new pathway. Thin at first. Getting used. The brain doesn't erase old patterns, but it can build alongside them. The research on neuroplasticity is clear on this. The brain keeps rewiring throughout life, not just in childhood, and it doesn't need dramatic events to do it. It updates through small things. Repeated. Saying how you actually feel instead of whatever fills the silence. Letting a compliment land instead of moving out of its way before it even touches you. Noticing that you've gone quiet inside, and staying with that for a second instead of immediately explaining it away. None of this feels like progress when you're doing it. It feels like almost nothing. But in practice, it looks like this. Something uncomfortable happens. And instead of immediately deciding you're overreacting, you leave the feeling alone for a moment. Just let it exist without a verdict. Someone is kind to you and you notice the instinct to deflect. And instead of following it, you pause on it. Let the kindness sit for just a second. Small, repeated, cumulative. For someone who grew up without being seen. Learning to be a fair witness to themselves, the way someone should have been for them once, is not a small thing. It's kind of the whole thing. If something in this video landed quietly for you, if you recognize the person I was describing before I even finished describing them, hold on to that for a second. Not because a name for something fixes it, but because that recognition is something. Your nervous system just did something it may not have learned properly early on. It echoed something back, faintly maybe, but it was there. The person who grew up not knowing how to be loved isn't someone who is broken. They're someone whose first lessons about love were incomplete, and incomplete lessons can be continued. Not quickly, not all at once, but the fact that the wanting is still there, that some part of you is still curious about what it would actually feel like to let something in, that isn't damage. That's the part of you that never stopped reaching. It was always worth reaching. If this put words to something you've been carrying quietly, there's more where this came from. I make these regularly. Stick around. There's something connected to all of this we didn't get to today. Why some people from childhoods exactly like this grow up to become the most emotionally perceptive, deeply available people you'll ever meet. And why that gift almost always comes with a cost. That one's next.